Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, we are chatting to Alie Komape, who was the first guest on Prime Live that we did speak to after October 7 last year. Now, Komape actually predicted that there would actually be this, or it would actually be the start of a brutal onslaught against the Palestinian people never ever seen before. Now, Israel has since killed more than 43,000 Palestinians, and today we mark about 1 year of what has turned out to be the most severe genocide the world has ever witnessed, and also claimed the lives of at least about 16,000 children. Now, as Lebanon becomes Israel's next war front, we welcome back to the show 1 year later Africa for Palestine's communication and campaigns manager, Alie Komape. Assalamu alaikum, Ali. Thank you so much for joining us here on INX Prime Live.
Walaikum salam, and thanks for having me.
No, it's such a pleasure having you. I just want to get straight into this conversation. Now, before we actually revisit, the conversation we had a year ago, and I do remember that conversation, I just wanted to find out, I saw a lot of stuff on social media as well, in Cape Town, in Lodium. There was a lot of these pro-Palestinian protests that happened. It was quite a busy weekend. Tell us a little bit more about some of the protests that happened around the country.
Different cities in around South Africa commemorated the October 7th as an important day in the Palestinian calendar. In South Africa specifically, in these major cities, South Africans have, a year later, South Africans have kept Palestine on their lips. They have kept it on their dinner conversation tables. They have kept it in their work WhatsApp groups. They have kept it as a conversation until today. So it showed yesterday, on this past weekend actually, Saturday and Sunday, and even today there were some activities that South Africans have kept Palestine on their lips. So the gatherings, the protests, the actions that happened the past weekend is just a vindication of South Africa's commitment to the Palestinian cause.
I think we're looking at some of the visuals right now, and you can see this was obviously in Cape Town, but there were other protests, like you did mention, in Lodium, in Soweto, all over the country in particular. And I think it's such a beautiful thing that South Africans are, standing up for what's right. I just want to go back to our conversation that we had last year. Now, I wanted to know, did you expect we would actually be still talking about Israel's onslaught, on Gaza? 365 days later, it's literally been exactly a year now.
As we speak right now, the government of Netanyahu, the apartheid regime of Netanyahu, is deploying foot soldiers in northern Gaza again. So we never expected this. We never expected it at this scale. I think everybody, not caught by surprise, but with dismay, over 43,000 people have been killed. Over 90% of Palestinians in Gaza have been displaced. Thousands others are under the rebels. So we never really thought it could get to this far. Even today, as we speak right now, Israeli drones are hovering over Gaza and dropping more bombs. In fact, Israel has, since October 7th, Israel has dropped over 12,000 tons of explosive in Gaza, equivalent to a nuclear bomb. And they are continuing to drop more bombs. I don't think anybody expected it to get this bad and to get this far.
Yeah, if you're looking at the visuals right now, there's practically almost in some areas nothing left, right? And that's the horrible, horrific thing about it. So I want to look at it, and we are speaking about the scale of death and destruction as well that we've seen so far. Can you liken any other, or is there any other global conflict that we can compare to what we have noticed live daily from October 8th until today?
Look, I think I would not want to compare this type of events. But what we know is that it's genocide. Of course, genocide happens in different ways and in different forms. The genocide that happened in Rwanda, the ethnic genocide that happened in Rwanda is different from the one in Gaza. Let me give you an example. So Israel controls the land, the sea, and the air of Gaza. Over 2.5 million people, Palestinians in Gaza, are trapped. They literally have nowhere else to go. So they are in this type of a micro oven that they are being cooked to death. They can't do anything about it. In other instances, just like the Myanmar genocide of the Rohingya, right? They could expect to Bangladesh, and we saw this. We saw images on our televisions of mass exile of the Rohingyas moving into other regions close to Myanmar. In Rwanda, they were moving across the borders to Uganda and other places for safety. Palestinians have nowhere else to go, right? We've heard about what they call safe zones, where Palestinians are told, go to this place in Gaza, it's not bombed. And when they go there, that's where they're targeted and they're killed. So I think it's one of its kind. We've never seen something like this before. And I think the closest we've seen is the gas chambers of the Holocaust, when Hitler was killing East European Jews. But we've never seen anything like it. Palestinians, 2.5 million of them are being killed. Right now, they're being starved to death. There's massive waves of disease in Gaza. There's no access to medication. So these 2.4 million are really just condemned to death. In other cases, you had, for instance, in World War, you had the Allies who were coming into these concentration camps and rescuing. Palestinians are alone. Nobody's coming to their rescue a year later.
No, it's definitely worrying in that sense. I just want to look at some of the words that came out of the state of Israel's not military, but actually their state in particular. We're looking at some of the objectives that Netanyahu actually came up with, and I'm reading them now. I mean, the two main things that he mentioned was obviously to destroy the Palestinian resistance, but then also to have a lot of their hostages or citizens returned back. Now, I'm looking at also some of the numbers here, and we do know that there's about 100 hostages that still remain in Gaza in particular. Clearly, they then failed in some of their objectives, right?
I think we are looking at a spectacular military failure from Israel. Many military analysts have said they just don't have a plan. A year later, they are continuously dropping bombs in Gaza. A year later, they are starting another war on another front in Lebanon. A year later, they are looking to go on a duel one-on-one with Iran. They just don't have a plan. So this is a spectacular military failure from one of the world's best militaries. Just to put matters into perspective, since October 7th, there have been billions and billions of dollars given to Israel in military aid. What essentially this means is that the bombs that have been dropped in Gaza are US bombs. The money that Israel receives, in excess of billions, it's given to Israel on the condition that they buy arms from America. Right? So these are top-rank stuff. But to this day, they're dropping these explosives, but there's no success. They've not killed the resistance, number one. They are not negotiating in good faith to get their hostages. In fact, we believe they don't want them. We believe they don't want the hostages at all. They want to use them as an excuse to kill more Palestinians. So there's no end in sight for Israel. They just want to continue the blatant and indiscriminate killing and maiming of Palestinians. But this, like I said, is a spectacular failure on their part.
Yeah, and I think let's also just take a moment to speak about exactly that, like the Palestinians. I think the one word that comes to mind is resilience. The resilience of the Palestinian people. I mean, after all that they've been going through over the last year, but also looking at the fact that they're actually surrounded. I mean, this is the Middle East. You're surrounded by a lot of other Muslim Arab countries in that sense, with no support whatsoever, almost no assistance from anyone, but yet they still have the ability to be that resilient as well. What does that mean to you?
I mean, it's inspirational. What we know from our own history in South Africa is that oppression is not sustainable. It's going to end at some point. And I can tell you who has the better fighting will between the two, the oppressed and oppressed. The oppressed has a better fighting will. And Palestinians, even to this day, refuse to die on their knees while begging their oppressor for life, but they want to die on their feet with guns in their hands fighting for their liberation. So this is quite inspirational, and I think generations to come, they will look to the Palestinian cause and say, if they can do it, then we can do it. We're looking forward to a future that is peaceful, that is just, and people live in freedom. And whoever wants that freedom, the Palestinians is an example. You look at them and you say, my goodness, look at how they fought for theirs. Look at how they're fighting for theirs. I can fight for them. And because struggles are similar. We can see this happening elsewhere in the world. Oppressed groups of people are standing in solidarity with Palestinians because they can identify with their struggle, but also because they're inspired by Palestinians in their fight against Israeli settler colonialism. So it's quite inspiring, the Palestinian resistance fight. I mean, look at the assassination of Comrade Hania in Iran. It just didn't take 2 weeks or so. The resistance had already another leader who's more experienced, who's more ruthless, they say, who's more cunning and calculative. And the movement looked to be in a the resistance movement looked to be in a way much better position. Not that the former leader was not effective, but here is another better one. So whoever they kill, whoever they assassinate, there's always someone better. There's always someone who's going to come up. So it looks as if the resistance movements in Palestine, they go from strength to strength. The more Israel attacks them, the more they get formidable.
No, that's very true. And I mean, also just looking at what's currently happening now, right? And I think it's important for us to have that conversation because we ideally want a situation or a solution like you just mentioned. But we have to look at what's happening currently. We're seeing that Israel also started, obviously attacking other fronts, for example, in Iran, like you mentioned, also in Lebanon. Are you afraid, or what's your opinion on the idea of an all-out war happening within that region?
An all-out war in that region benefits Israel. Israel never wanted peace. Peace does not benefit Israel. But the more this genocide campaign continues in Gaza, the more actors in the region see Israel for what they are. I'll give you an example. The government of France have refused to give weaponry and money to Netanyahu now. Long-time allies. We are seeing ordinarily, just from now, we were looking at the United Nations. We are seeing countries that would not ordinarily attack Israel saying, but no, enough is enough. So I don't see a regional war happening because Israel is going to be isolated. They can not only depend on the United States. Governments like in the UK are going to start isolating Israel, like most European countries are at the moment. In the region, I think the patronage, the blackmail is not going to work. We are seeing countries like Saudi Arabia saying, but no, we cannot continue in this fashion because more and more people are getting killed. So Israel is getting isolated in the region, and they can't afford an all-out war alone. So before even that happens, I think Israel is going to be on its knees, and they're going to be forced to go to the negotiation table with Palestinians for a peaceful resolution to the war.
Yeah, and I mean, you're speaking about all these countries coming out now and showing their support to some extent. I mean, we're looking at the 79th UN or United Nations General Assembly that just, happened over the last few days in particular. We also saw that almost every single president condemned, the actions of Israel for the last full year in particular. But we could also see countries like Qatar, like Egypt, for example, even the US. Could we end up seeing them coming in to maybe broker an idea of a ceasefire opportunity?
Of course, look, there have been many instances of a ceasefire that was almost imminent, and Israel just refuses. For instance, the resistance movement in Gaza says, we don't want them, take them, but do not dictate terms of how we must, because Israel is they're quite mischievous in their negotiations. They're saying, no, release the hostages and give us those Palestinians who were involved in the October 7 operation, Al-Aqsa floods. And so they're saying, no, you're being mischievous. We're going to give you your hostages. And even there is this moment they were saying, okay, take your hostages and bring all Palestinian hostages that are languishing in Israeli jails. But then it got to a point where the resistance movement said, look, no, okay, take your hostages, stop bombing us. But they refuse. Israel does not want. So I don't think, I don't think they want peace. I don't think they're interested in peace at all.
We hope that things definitely change over the next few days and weeks. But again, Alie, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on INX Prime Live.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect, guys. That is Alie Komape, who is actually the communications and campaign manager at Africa for Palestine. Now, we know it's been about 1 year since the Gaza genocide actually started. And I mean, thousands of people ended up getting killed, also thousands of young children as well. We hope to see a change in the near future so that everyone can live a lot better, especially the Palestinians, and make sure that they live a much better life. But on that note, we are going to take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.